Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast with Mike and Mike. Sales is a thinking process. This podcast will help you learn about what works in sales, how to hone your skills, and increase your success. I'm your host, Jody Mayberry, and I'm here with Mike Simmons, one of the co-founders of Catalyst Sale. Mike, we have a listener question. I know you've been waiting for another good one, and I think this one will be interesting.
All right, bring it on.
Jason Clement from New York, he writes in and asks about mistakes. He said, you always talk about successes on the podcast. Can you share some of the mistakes you've made? Now, Mike, have you ever made a mistake in sales?
Many, and I continue to do them, and I probably will make many more, and hopefully I'll learn from each of them. Hearing about the New York piece, one of the mistakes I made was when the Giants were winning Super Bowls that I didn't convert and become a Giants fan. Everything's still green and white in the household. And if I would have become a Giants fan, would have won a couple of Super Bowls while I've been alive. A mistake number one of many. One of my favorite mistakes to reflect on, and I absolutely just felt like a jerk when it happened. I was in a meeting with a significant retailer based out here in the Valley. And I was I think it was an implementation discussion. It's been so long since it happened, but I remember I can feel what it was like to be in the room and be with this group of people. And we were talking about multiple options for implementations. And I said, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And the look of horror of those inside the room, and then the colors I changed after it happened, and the damage that it did to the relationship, because it was one of those things where I think at that point in time, things really took a turn and ended up moving off of the account. But I think they thought, wow, if you could even say that out loud, you shouldn't be working with us. And heck, I've got dogs. Grant, I'm not a cat fan. I'm a Sun Devil. We don't like wildcats. I've always had dogs. But saying there's more than one way to skin a cat in a group of people who bring their pets to work and have pet pictures on their desk, bad move.
There's a few things going through my head now. One is, how do you recover from something like that? The other is, you may have just started to divide the audience with this whole cat and dog thing.
Probably have divided the audience. And the purpose of that, I might tell a little bit of a white lie. I think Connor's a cat fan, but no, I'm joking. I don't know if Connor's a cat fan or not. He's got so many animals in his house. He's like Dr. Doolittle. He's got a pet turtle, Dougie Fresh, that when he got it was about the size of a quarter. Yeah, that's the name of the turtle. It was about the size of a quarter. Now I don't know how big it is, but I do know that it's going to outlive generations of his household. So they've always got some new animal in the house. And I have never done harm to an animal. So I can attest to that. Animals have done harm to me, but I have never done harm to an animal. As far as recovery, it's kind of like recovering on this, where I've segmented the audience. Now I'm just going to smile, hope that people enjoy the candor, and we move on. The thing you got to do is you got to say, I'm sorry. I am sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was a slip. It was not intended, to offend people. Again, I'm sorry. And you move on. And ideally, your reputation is one that will carry you. Hopefully that's not the mistake that you make the first time you meet with that client, because if it is, you're probably going to have a hard time overcoming it and they're going to have to change reps. In this instance, I actually lost the deal a couple of months down the road. And I don't know if this had impacted it. It could have, whatever. It has definitely impacted my thought process of think before you act, think before you speak, try to be really careful about what you say. I was in a car. Someone asked me about, being directionally sound and being able to find my way around a city. And we got to the place that we were supposed to be. And I said, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. The person in the backseat of the car was visually impaired. So I have been known to put my foot in my mouth. And, that's part of the challenge of kind of speaking off the cuff. So you've got to be really careful about audience. You've got to be really careful about the words you use. You've got to be really careful about how they impact others. So those are some huge mistakes that I've made kind of in my career and my personal life. And I'm sure I will continue to put my foot in my mouth going forward.
Do you think there's a difference in how customers or potential customers view mistaken judgment, like your cat comment, versus a technical mistake, like you messed up paperwork or something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. Another mistake. Working with a large semiconductor company, sat in on a meeting. It was an executive level meeting. We had executives from our company, executives from their company. We got an email. There was an email that came out after the fact. I intended to respond back to my internal team with notes that I had taken during the conversation and recommendations on how we move forward, how we overcome one of the challenges we were running into with that client. Unfortunately, I replied to all. I sent everything to the client. So again, I mean, this stuff happens with technology. You're going to make mistakes. With technology, you're going to miss on an implementation. Systems go down. Those systems might be critical inside an organization. The thing that you do is you own up to it. And that's what I did. After I realized it and couldn't recall the message, couldn't unhit send, sent a note back to everybody. I said, this was unprofessional of me. I'm sorry that I sent this to everybody. I had a follow-up conversation with our sponsor inside the organization. And the sponsor inside the organization said, hey, you know what, Mike, it happens. This has happened to other people before. You're probably not the last time it'll happen to you. It is the last time it happened to me. I have not yet done something like that again. And what we did is it actually made the relationship stronger, because the byproduct was the client was able to see my internal notes that talked about how we could support the relationship going forward. So it was a negative thing that was not intended to be turned into a positive thing, but ultimately turned into a positive thing because they knew that I had their back. They knew that I was committed to their overall success, and I wasn't focused on some short-term, let's just put a Band-Aid on this challenge and address it there. So, my feedback there would be make the best of each of those situations, own up to them, and move forward.
I believe Lee Cockrell once told me that when you make a mistake the first time, that just happens. People make mistakes. But if you do the same mistake a second time, it's now become a choice because you didn't do anything to fix it or prevent yourself from making that mistake again. What do you think about that?
Well, like with most of Lee's quotes, it really hits the mark. And it's the first time it's a mistake, you learn from it. The second time it's a choice, and I think it applies. And if you repeat it a third or a fourth time, now it's just this continued ongoing behavior. And you've got to go back into the organization, and you've either got to say to the individual, if it's the individual who's making that same choice over and over again, you've got to ask the individual why they're making that choice. Maybe there's something about the business that they understand, or something about the process that you've implemented that they understand or don't understand, where they think this is the right way to go about doing their job. And maybe then you learn from it, you adjust process, and you adapt. So learn from it. But if you go into the situation and it's just them trying to take shortcuts, or you're trying to take shortcuts and you're not focused on the end and keeping that end in mind, or focused on the customer, then decisions need to be made, and you've got to let people go. I mean, if they're just not the right fit for the organization, don't keep them in the organization. Don't allow that to go on. I sat in a session just the other day, a boot camp, and they were talking about a theory in Japanese leadership. And I'm going to completely butcher whether this is a Japanese leadership principle or a management principle, but we'll add the notes into the show notes. But it was basically humans do not make mistakes. I took a picture of the slide, one, to be able to share with Jen, and next time I get called out on making a mistake, but two, just to kind of have that sink in. Their philosophy is based on the idea that it's not the human that makes the mistake, it's the process or the system that's put in place that enabled that mistake to happen. And if that mistake happens, then you've got to go back and ask those 5 whys about why did it happen. And the story that they told in this workshop, which was really cool, it was about a machine that goes down inside an organization. Maybe it's a manufacturing organization. And you go back and you look at the machine, you find out that the reason the machine went down is because the fuse blew. So then you go in and you might just go ahead and fix the fuse. But the good leader, the good manager, the good person when it comes to process is going to ask, well, why did the fuse blow? Well, the fuse blew because there was too much current coming through the system. Well, why was there too much current coming through the system? And here's where I show my lack of technical aptitude or electrical aptitude, but it was because of this reason. Well, why did that happen? Well, it was because of this. And you work your way back to the source, which was, hey, maybe the filter on the oil pump that was running the machine is what needs to be replaced. And now replacing that filter on a consistent basis becomes part of the process rather than someone waiting for the next fuse to blow and then having a fuse on hand to stick it in there. So yeah, if you're having a lot of those mistakes happen inside your organization, and mistakes could be, I have a lot of deals forecasted in proposal, but they're not moving to close one, then you've got to revisit your process and say, is it your people? Is it your process? Is it the market? Is something changing? But learn from those mistakes, adapt, and iterate.
This reminds me of my time as a law enforcement officer. If there is what people would often call a traffic accident, that's never called an accident because an accident just happens, right? Nobody really did anything. It just happened. But there's a reason why they're called incidents or collisions, because somebody did something to lead to that. And I think you have to look at mistakes the same way, is they don't just happen. Mistakes aren't usually an accident. Either you weren't paying attention, you made an errant judgment, like saying you more than one way to skin a cat. These things don't just happen. And it's all right to make mistakes, but you have to look at it and say, okay, what led to this? Was it I opened my mouth when I shouldn't have? Was it the process allows people to get a little too loose and not follow procedure? So I really like this, that it's okay to make them, just figure out why they happened.
Yeah. And maybe something that we talk about on another podcast at some point, it brings up an activity that I think is really important inside organizations, but maybe we talk about the impact of postmortems. So a postmortem either after a failure of a launch of a product, or a postmortem after the failure of winning a client, or even a postmortem after the success of a product or success of winning a client. So we'll add that to the list of topics to talk about at some point. If you've got other topics out there, please share them with us. You can find us at hello@catalystsale.com. We've just updated our website. Should be a little bit easier to navigate. You can access previous podcasts on that website. You can connect with us on Twitter at Catalyst Sale. And ratings and reviews really help us out. So if you're listening to the podcast and you found value out of it, please share it with others. Please go into iTunes, give us the 5-star rating, and add your review. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, that's great. I would also add, all of that's helpful, but now, Mike, I'm just adding this out of curiosity. If you have a story of a mistake you've made in sales and you want to share it with us, let us know. Send it to hello@catalystsale.com. I don't know about you, Mike, but I think I would like to hear some of those.
I would love to hear the worst mistakes ever. Like, just let's see who can beat somebody with a mistake. And it doesn't have to be sales. It could be anything. I mean, Jody talked about his mistake when he was going through his proposal, and he overcame that.
I did overcome that, but we can argue that. Was that a mistake or just a adventure? I don't know.
It could have been by design.
It could have. Well, it made a great story. So no matter what, I got a wife and a great story out of it.
Well, and a couple of kids and some other awesome memories that I can relate to.
Yes. Well, there we go. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for admitting your mistakes. I know some people don't do that. Maybe we should talk about that another time. But thank you so much, Mike. And thank you for listening to the Catalyst Sale Podcast.